I think we're live.
All right. We're live.
I think we're live. So here is the attempt.
All right.
So technology is telling me we're live. We hope we are. And as of now, we may not have anybody watching, but we're thrilled to be here.
We are. This is exciting. And welcome to everybody to the Lunchtime live stream. We are
our launch episode.
Yes.
Lunchtime live stream launch.
Yeah.
Okay, enough of that.
This morning I was thinking about it. I was like, the pilot episode. And I was like, that sounds funny. But it kind of is, I guess.
Launch.
The
I
launch.
like it.
So in this sort of season of life, things are interrupted and disrupted. Like you talked about in a sermon a while ago,
Yeah,
I guess.
yeah.
But it was great. And I know we've talked about it as a life group even, of just that distinction. And so to start, I think it would be cool to engage, to ask each of us to maybe think of different disruptions that have happened, or maybe in particular new habits that have been formed in this sort of time of disruption. And then for folks who are watching either currently or later, for you to also comment, because we would love to see, and even if we don't engage this time around, we would love to be able to do that in the future, of it to be a dialogue. And so Lindsey, would you share with us a habit that you formed?
Yeah, I feel like the last 6 months, I mean, the habits that we're no longer doing, the new habits, I feel like my favorite one that has been giving me life is every evening I eat about a half dozen to a dozen Oreos.
Holy cow.
When you said Oreos earlier, I didn't realize it was like a dozen.
So many Oreos, and now there's Halloween Oreos, so they have orange filling.
New incentive.
Yeah. The Thin Mints and the double stuff, the mega stuff. If you have not checked out the mega stuff, they put the rest of them to shame. They're pretty good.
Lindsey apparently is our in-house Oreo connoisseur.
Yep. Definitely.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
That is awesome. I'm like, oh man, I've been eting a lot of chips. Maybe that's the habit.
Oh no, you're
What?
doing it wrong.
Doing it wrong. It's
Eating
got to
new
be
habits.
Oreos.
Yep.
For Michaela and I, we've done a lot of walks because the bike trail's right there, and so we've gone on a lot of walks. It's just nice, especially on a day like today. I'm already looking forward to going home and walking on the bike path.
Good deal.
Yeah, we have good trails around here.
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
great.
we do. Yeah, same here. Obviously, we're in the same quarantine, have been since the beginning of this. In terms of disruptions, there's some similarity to that. And obviously this thing is coming out of disruption and analysis of that. So it is. Early on it was walks, probably less for me because some of the habit changes for me were pretty significant relative to how I do my week, because of the need to go to rely on technology to continue to engage people and communicate and have Newsong be a place where all of us are feeling connected and continue to do what we can to adjust to the new normal that came with COVID. So the pattern of how my typical week does relative to preparation for a Sunday, it was a major learning curve in readjusting that. Friday has always been my day off, and it still is, but everything had to get moved up 2 or 3 days in the week in order to get a pre-recorded service done by Thursday and set up all the technical stuff. And anyway, so probably most of what I experience as change of habits is more along the lines of just trying to make sure that as best we can, the experience of folks on a Sunday, and now we've discovered it's throughout the week, which is a good thing, was as seamless as possible. I mean, everybody's life got disrupted, right? But that was, for me, a significant change of habit and pattern to do all that we could then, to oversee us doing all we could to make sure that if Sunday morning still is the pattern that fits for most folks, that we're doing all we can to meet that need. So, and then of course, you and I talked about this as well. In terms of the exercise, it shifted from walking to spike ball.
Oh, yeah.
And so, obviously I'll do some spike ball or some cube, which is a pretty cool long game. So we do some of that here and there, and for an old guy, I don't do too bad at either one of those.
He's underselling it. He smokes us sometimes. We're out there, we're running around in our young, youthful bodies, trying as best we can.
The former athlete in me wants to make a comeback, and sometimes I get a glimpse of it. It's fleeting. It's fleeting.
Yeah. Well, thanks, y'all. I know that even just the talking about like the disruptions and the habits and this even idea for you came out of a recognition of some of that. Would you give some thoughts about how this came about, of your thoughts forming it?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, as I alluded to, as soon as the orders came down with COVID here, that it just was unwise to be meeting in person. All of us, the whole staff, leadership at Newsong went into high gear. What does it look like then to stay connected to people? And Lindsey, it was you talking about, I think it was an online seminar where they used the language somewhere along the lines of, in this time, given what's happening, if content is king, I think I'm going to get this right, if content is king, in other words, what we're saying and what people are hearing and learning, and whether that's on a Sunday morning or life group, then engagement, which is then different, is emperor. In other words, it takes precedence to keep people connected, to engage them. And so we really took that seriously from early on, and we had all these conversations of what does it look like then to leverage technology that was within our means, both in terms of capacity to understand and what's affordable and what's simple enough to give us the best experience possible. Primarily then for Sunday morning, but we have had those conversations with Kingdom City, with Love Our City, with Epic, with life groups. And so as a natural part of that is the conversation of, ultimately now that sort of everything is up in the air and needs to get evaluated, this is a good time to think also of what is the thing that maybe we're not doing that needs to be done, what needs to be born that can meet a need that up until this point we haven't had.
Yeah.
And so, we've been in that conversation and continue to try and refine that and stay on top of it. The other side of that question is, what have we been doing that may be time to let go, that even when the time comes where we're back in what feels like more of a normal life, that it may have run its course and we're going to do it differently. So, this is all a work in progress. And so the conversation about this particular thing started in my head in some ways, confirmed by, thoughts from an elder meeting that we were in, where they asked about something video-wise midweek, and so again in time it evolved into this, where we, as of this week, we have a name for it, Lunchtime Livestream, which came accidentally. But that's the goal, is to make and to recognize that engagement is king, and for all of us, in leadership, it's to let you know that we think about you, we care about you, we wholeheartedly want you to feel seen and heard and cared for and loved and connected with the best that we can offer in terms of ministry via technology as well as in person. So this was born out of that, and so I'm really excited about it, because I think it is and will be somewhat a fluid thing, and yet I know we've got some great plans for it as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you for getting into that. And it's hard to believe that the name just sort of came about randomly whenever there's a graphic. It makes it feel, it's like...
Thanks to Kelly, our resident creative director. It looks really good. We got that last night.
Yeah, it does look good.
We gave her the idea the day before, so she works well under pressure.
Yeah, fast turnaround.
She does a beautiful job. So yeah, it does. It feels kind of like, oh, this is official.
Yeah,
this is cool.
Yeah,
the logo, I'm saying.
Yeah, we'll see about this launch, the pilot episode. But yeah, so the as we have been sort of talking about it, the why does this happen? Why are we doing this? And we said to engage in dialogue with one another, the three of us, and also anyone else who might be here, but also with you. Yeah. So for all of us to engage in dialogue about the kingdom at work in and around the community of Newsong, in order to pursue discipleship to Jesus and its application in daily life together.
Yeah. I think it's great. That's the why statement, obviously, and I think it's important to have some place that bottom line, this is what we're trying to do here.
Yeah.
And I do think that was a significant, I think, part of the decision to keep moving forward with it was this becomes an avenue for communication engagement, but specifically to keep unpacking and experiencing and expressing and journeying together in what it looks like then to be disciples of Jesus, apprentices of Jesus, Jesus followers with intentionality, knowing that, one of the conversations, one of the things we said again from early on is, it was never meant to be a Sunday thing. And while we know that in our head, now we have an opportunity to say, we do something midweek, not just as a fun, entertaining thing, though we hope it's engaging and fun and entertaining to some degree, and informative, connecting. Underneath all that, as you're saying, is this goal of we're all keeping the conversation going of how do we keep growing as disciples, as apprentices of Jesus, discovering how to learn from Jesus, how he would live our lives, my life if he were me, kind of thing. So I think the why is an important one. So I appreciate you mentioning that.
Yeah, for sure. And, even thinking about like the format of this, of being 11:30 to noon, that even as I'm even thinking about how we started by talking about disruption, and that in a way it's easy, with the reflection emails or whatever that typically go out in the mornings, you can start your day, but then you get to work and then, work gets busy. So to also have this like a midweek sort of point of engagement, or that might disrupt, to use that word, disrupt the workday, to maybe even just a 30 minutes of recentering or whatever, that there's a lot I think that God could do through the lunchtime live stream that I think is good.
Yeah, I agree. I think the touch point midweek, we hope it, certainly anticipate it to be life-giving. That's that's the goal for us, for all of us, and connective. So as we said from the beginning, we do want to hear from you. We want this to be a conversation, a dialogue. And hopefully then, as we move forward, it's helpful and that's beneficial for you.
Yeah, and so we'll do it on Facebook Live. So there should be a place to comment questions as they might come up, or even responses. And also on Instagram Live. So either of those platforms, and then it should be saved also to those social media accounts, so then you can at any point go back, and if you're not able, if your lunch happens to be at noon or whenever or 2 or who knows if I get lunch today kind of thing, because those days happen.
But we know Lindsey got Oreos for sure.
Yeah.
2 times in one day.
So next Tuesday we'll all be eating Oreos, I think. Yeah, that should be our thing. But yeah, so that's sort of the format. Facebook, Instagram Live, 11:30 to noon with
Tuesdays.
On Tuesdays.
Yeah.
For the next several weeks.
Yeah.
So obviously the opening of this, as we've announced the last week or so anyway, part of the heart of this is to give a place to unpack what's being taught on Sundays. And so we're launching a new series this Sunday I'm very excited about. But again, in terms of the overall goal of this, it's to do that on a regular basis, but to go beyond that as well, just to have at times maybe guests on that are part of the Newsong family, want you to meet them, or it can be just a question of, we've got a number of questions in we haven't had a chance to address, and we'll spend a day or a lunch essentially walking through some of what we've heard. So again, your feedback to us will be really, really helpful. We'll probably need some grace, at least for today, because of the technology of it, we understand how it works, but we may be missing elements of that. So if you're already chatting with us and I'm not seeing it, I'm sorry. I'm trying to monitor that in our camera as well. It's a combined thing. So we'll learn as we go. We'll do our best. I assure you.
Not dodging questions.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So I think that is a good time then to even maybe preview, to use some of the rest of our 16-ish minutes to preview the series that we've been talking about, because we don't always do church-wide studies in life groups.
Yeah.
And so it seems, and I know we've been sort of pushing life groups, and for folks that meeting in person or can't seem to make the Zoom thing work, that this could be a tremendous space to be able to still have that engagement with sermons and with discussions with things like that. And so I know there's that, even as we've sort of have talked about it as a staff of the direction of this sermon series, I'm really excited about it. So no pressure. But would you give maybe a preview and insight into how it connects with maybe where we've been and some of the things we've already learned?
I'm happy to. I think, there's, you guys know me well enough to know there's always just a bunch rolling around in my head, and my biggest challenge is trying to figure out how to distill that down and present something that makes sense and is clear and concise.
There's a lot on the editing room floor.
There's always a lot on the editing room floor in my mind. A lot of competing voices in my head. I think the original idea for the series really began a long time ago, around exposure to, and this is several years back, to some writing by a guy named Daniel Goleman, who wrote about emotional intelligence. And so I read what he had to say, because at the time, it was in a situation where felt like, some of what was unfolding before me had to do with essentially some challenges on that level, and that's probably the best way to put it. And so somehow came across the book, and it helped me make sense of the role of the power of our emotions, which isn't just sort of feelings, while those are a strong part of it. When we're talking about, our humanity, if you would, who we are as people, all of this is interwoven. We go back to sort of jump around and finish your question at the same time, to address your question. Some of the intent of the series is to piggyback on what I began to unpack last year and spent quite a few months on, which I would talk about really as, for Newsong, the heart of what we're trying to do is help people understand how to become the kind of people, we have a couple different ways of saying it, the kind of people, not just people who do good, but the kind of people through whom goodness naturally flows. To become the kind of people who naturally do what Jesus commanded us to do. Our ways of understanding, essentially, the call from Jesus is Jesus' goal. Jesus is always teaching. In other words, anytime we're seeing Jesus somewhere, he's always teaching. Even if he's not speaking, he's teaching. He's the master teacher, and he knows what we need is to learn from him, to find out where life really is, where the good life, what he calls eternal life, abundant life, it's all the same thing, the kind of life that holds up here and now through all eternity, in every moment that I'm in this moment, and in a moment 10 million years from now. It holds up to offer the best of what I'm wired to need and want. And so it's, ultimately for me, the whole journey of Newsong has been waking up to understanding that that's what Jesus is actually doing. And then trying to find ways, like I said, to dial that, stream that down to how do you communicate that, and then how do we keep that before us. So last year's series, because I think it was over 1 or 2 or 3 series that I kept unpacking it, which is sort of how this thing typically happens with me when I find something that I feel like, how come I've never heard this before? It happened to me with Sermon on the Mount. First time I taught Sermon on the Mount, I thought, as I looked at it, I've never heard a Sermon on the Mount full, beginning to end. This should maybe take 8 to 10 weeks. And so it actually, I think, ended up being 3 series and maybe 30 to 32 weeks, because I just kept having these moments of, this is so essential to what I'm experiencing as a new freedom and vibrancy to my experience of faith relative to the result in my own life of wrestling with and trying to live into this truth is producing so much life in me, transforming me. And so over time then, I certainly highly influenced, if you're around Newsong, highly influenced by Dallas Willard's work, and that came years later. I was playing the Newsong bingo.
Dallas who?
Because Dallas is far and away, in my own reading anyway, the one who gave clarity to that, like I've never heard anybody else give clarity to that. So it was out of that last year I began the series to, what does it look like then? And I framed it from the beginning that way. if the command of Jesus is to go and make disciples, which, his final command is go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and Son, Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you, and I'm with you to the end of the age. That's the objective. The church we are to be disciples, apprentices of Jesus. There's a historical context for that. We unwrap that around here. That's a commitment of, I'm all in, I'm learning from you. That's what I talk about. That's what we're referring to. It's how Jesus' disciples would have understood their role relative to, I'm learning from the rabbi, from the master, and Jesus as the ultimate master of life, how he would live my life if he were me. And so that's the thing under the thing, no matter what I'm teaching. We're headed there. How are we learning to live the life that Jesus would live if he were us, which is very different than how do we learn to just follow the rules, how do we become good people, how do we live a good Christian life. Those have different answers. Those have far more surface answers. So I began to unpack that, and essentially what we're talking about then is this idea of spiritual formation, which is language, if you've been around religion, feels like a kind of a mystical statement, like, oh, I'm spiritually formed, and it's not that at all. It really is a very practical and human experience. Spiritual formation means essentially, well, let me start with this. Every human being is being spiritually formed, either by intention or by happenstance. They're either walking into it intentionally or they're drifting into it without knowing it. Because we are all spiritual beings. We are all spiritual beings. Every human being is made in the image of God, and because of that, we have a spiritual dimension to us. That is unique to human beings. And so we're all being formed by the stories, the lives we live, the experiences that we have in the world around us that is shaped by our stories. Our stories come loaded with thoughts and feelings. We see the world, we engage the world. I've said 1,000 times, maybe more around here, that we are who we are. Every value, conviction, belief, that we hold dear and shapes us, we gained by stories. Again, so story is that medium that we're hardwired for story. It is the thing that shapes how we see and move and what we believe, how we engage the world. If we break stories down, then it is about thoughts, what I experience, what I think about that, and every thought we have then is a series of ideas or images, and they come with associated emotions, associated feelings, desires, sensations, if you would. So last year, essentially, I did a series that essentially tried to give language to that. And there was a series of concentric circles that spiritual formation essentially is. At the heart of who we are, what the Bible talks about as the heart is actually the will. Or the spirit. You can use that. So we talk about our spirit, heart, or will are exchangeable terms. For who we are basically is we are our will, and our body then becomes the place through which we move into the world. Dallas calls it, our bodies are a little power pack through which then we exert our will into the world. It's our own kingdom, if you would. We talk about the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
God has to, he's given us a kingdom because we have to operate within the realm of this finiteness of kingdom to understand how to move in with his kingdom underneath the role of our kingdom and his kingdom is the journey. And so that involves, and essentially it starts who I am is my will, my choices. The greatest freedom we have is the freedom to choose what we will think about, what we will engage our mind to. God will never interfere with that. He cannot interfere with that. He will not rule over our kingdom. So we unpack that then, but then it moves out in concentric circles. It goes then to our mind. Love the Lord with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Says that for a reason. It begins with our will, which is our heart. And then it moves into the mind, which is comprised of thoughts and feelings. Feelings then is actually feelings, desires, sensations. So that's the emotional life, is all those things. And from there, then it moves into our body. We have thoughts and feelings about this. I'm hungry. I need some Oreos. I feel hungry. I like Oreos. And I have thoughts that say, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't.
Yes, God.
But I choose to do that. That's the human experience. It's how we're wired to work. That's always where Jesus was teaching to. He's never teaching to just behavior on the outside. Never. In fact, the challenge that he faced with the Pharisees was the focus for them was what we do on the outside. And that's the primary focus of what I would call a toxic religion. Is its focus is exclusively, what do you do? Are you good or bad? Do you do good or bad? And Jesus moved to the will because that's where it matters. That's why scriptures say God looks at the heart. He looks at the will. Do you want to? If you want to, then the grace of God, which is God doing for us what we can't do for ourselves, is available to us in oceans. That's Jesus' goal, is to teach us how to posture our lives such that the grace of God can empower me to do what I can't do on my own. So I unpacked that, come to this series essentially then, as I began to then read a long time ago, just in the last few months, realized that I didn't really unpack this idea of what Goleman calls emotional intelligence, which is similar. It touches on that, but it's not the exact same thing I'm talking about. But there's some good secular information about that. Goleman writes about it, and others have talked about, essentially emotional intelligence as a pretty significant factor for success in life. And it talks about essentially being emotionally aware, self-aware, managing your emotions. All those things are okay. In terms of the kingdom life, they scratch the surface but miss the essence. So the series is to piggyback to some degree on some of that and say there's a reality to us about who we are emotionally wired, tied to thoughts, that has a very, very critical role in our capacity to be formed into the character of Jesus, to become the kind of people through whom goodness naturally flows, to become the kind of people who naturally, it becomes my nature to obey Jesus' commands, to do what Jesus commanded. Specifically, if we think of the two great commands, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself, where Jesus says, these are the key. You do these and everything else falls in place. All the law and the prophets hang on these. So that's at the center of this. So the question becomes then, what's the role of then my emotional life, my inner life, that is overlapped with, it's not separate from, overlapped with my thought life, with my mind, but we unpacked a little bit of that in the previous series. What I want to do is address this time the critical role that is probably the most overlooked dimension in my experience. I can talk about my experience. In my experience as a Christ follower now, at almost 59 years of age, I've never heard anyone teach in a format of a Sunday service the role of my emotional life in my desire to be formed into the image of Christ. I get that we all acknowledge it's a part of who we are, but what do I do with that? Because the impact of that, I'm going to have to wrap this up. The impact of that is far, far, far more significant than we know. Let me give you one illustration that helps maybe give some context to this and set up a sense of where some of the series will head. To understand then, as I've described the human being, to pull this into the role of the emotions in our inability to be who we want to be, either intentionally or unintentionally. A number of years ago, it was Shelley and I went to Southwest Oklahoma, a little town called Snyder, and offered the possibility of a job there as a youth pastor, music pastor. Our oldest son Josiah was a year old at the time, and so in that part of the country, in that tradition, you come and speak to the church. The church has a business meeting. Everybody shows up. You sort of introduce yourself, tell your story, and they vote on whether or not they're going to ask you to be part of their staff. And so we did that, and it all went well. It was I felt like experience was good, and we didn't have any reason to suspect that it wouldn't go well. It didn't. I ended up getting the job, and but I remember distinctly this thought came to mind this morning as I was thinking about this. As people are leaving the building at night, they're coming by and shaking their hands, telling us their names, and can't wait to meet you and to get to know you, and so glad you're here, and very sweet people. One older gentleman, time older than me because I was very young at the time, comes by and he shakes my hand and he says, my name is such and such, and it's nice to meet you. And he said, I need to tell you. He said, I voted against you coming tonight. And I said, I understand that. I said, that's okay. And he said, well, I need to tell you why. And he said, my daughter was murdered. Not that long ago, and you look just like the guy who murdered her. You remind me, is what he said, of the guy who murdered her, and so I just can't get past that. And so it was a heavy moment, and I just felt so sorrowful for him. Certainly, I get it. I understand where you're coming from, and he says, so I don't, I'm glad you're here, but I don't know that I'll be able to come. So we exchanged a few words and tried to be as affirming as I understood, and I get that. But years later, reflecting on that, in light of what I understand then about how we're made and what spiritual formation looks like, here's a man who, to the best of his ability, loved Jesus, wanted to be faithful to his church, wanted to be supportive of his church, and yet the story of death and destruction in his life was so tied into deep feelings, understandably, deep feelings of hurt and loss and grief, and probably some anger and questions and frustration at God, and he just doesn't have any idea what to do with that. I think if I had asked him before that, if I had run into him on the street or somebody had surveyed him and said, "Do you love your neighbor as yourself?" he would say, "Yeah, I'm trying to do it with everything in me." But in that moment, I'm the one neighbor he can't love as himself. Not because he doesn't want to, not because he's intending to do something different. It's because he doesn't know how to get past this story that brings with it such severe, harmful, hurtful, painful emotions. And so he's left at this impasse of, how do I get past this? And obviously that's never a conversation I had with him. But it's one example, and again, there's so many of them, of the ways in which if we don't understand the roles that our emotional life, our emotional health plays in our spiritual formation, then we'll miss how easy it is to be limited in our capacity to become the people we want to become as followers of Jesus. It will impact us, and for many, maybe they'll never even know that it did, maybe they'll never know how to get past it, and yet it will significantly limit in a variety of degrees, essentially depending on the story. And so it's just that important that we understand, how do I become aware of the role of emotions in my life, the impact of those in my day-to-day, a genuine desire to be a Christ follower, and what do I do when I discover I have these stories, I have these emotions, I have this part of me that brings with it needs lots of work. I have lots of stuff to turn over to the Spirit. And how do I do that? What does it look like? So that's where the series is headed, and I'm very excited about it, as much for myself as hopefully for all of us wanting to come to the table, saying, we're here, palms up. Jesus, teach us how to be the us that we can be. Teach us how you would live our lives with my stories and my brokenness, if you were me, so that we have tangible ability to say, I know now how to take next steps to become the kind of person who by nature naturally is loving my neighbor, even if my neighbor is fill in the blank, looks like my daughter's murderer, even if my neighbor hangs me on a cross. How do I pray the prayer, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do? That's the goal. Just that.
Just that.
Small potatoes.
We're out of time here, so probably should wrap up. Sorry.
No, that's great. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that story too.
Yeah. And the name of the series?
The name of the series is Well Loved, and because it all hinges, again, it's a great title. I didn't come up with that one. So great cooperative effort from our staff. The idea essentially is, if we're to love God with all of our hearts and minds, and strength, and love our neighbor as ourself, to love my neighbor as myself, I have to know, not just believe. It's different. To know is the embodied experience that I am loved, that I am worthy. As Brene Brown would say, I'm worthy of love and belonging. It's not her truth. It's just she gave it language. Because out of that, to the degree to which I have that experience as my reality, it's that gives me the measure of which I can offer that to my neighbor. And so that's the goal, to know that I am well loved. And if that's my holdup at this point, is I still don't think I'm the kind of person who is accepted as I am, who is loved as I am, who belongs as I am, then that's going to be a big part of the work. But with the end goal that as you're growing in that, then you are automatically growing in your capacity by the grace of God, because all of this is fueled by grace. You can't get there on your own. You become the kind of person through whom that naturally flows to other. It changes the way you see the world. It changes the way you will to go into the world. So well loved goes from both sides of that.
Yeah, that's
awesome.
Great. Yeah, I'm excited. It's good.
Me too.
I'm excited.
I remember when we were getting the download last week, my reaction was, that's good news, right?
Yes.
Like that
Yes.
is good news, and I'm excited to be on the journey.
Yes, I mean, I could spend 5 minutes talking about that, but I'm not. Get on my soapbox. So I'll stay off the
We
soapbox.
could do it
but
next
yes,
Tuesday.
I'll say
Next
yes,
week, next week.
wholeheartedly yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you both.
Yeah.
And thank you to you all for sharing
Yes.
your lunchtime
Yeah.
with us. We'll.
Okay, we're-
Oh yeah.
Details.
Couple of things.
So starting this
for
Sunday,
it.
new series. You can go to YouTube. There will be a 9:15 pre-recorded service,
Yes.
and then at 11 o'clock, we're still doing in person in the living room here. You can register on the Newsong website, or you can live stream that service on YouTube. And then the invitation is to engage here on Tuesdays at 11:30 for lunchtime live stream.
That's right.
And then if you're not plugged into a life group, would definitely encourage you to do that. You can check those out through the Newsong app or the website. Get plugged in either Zoom or in person. Those groups are meeting and they'll be engaging in this dialogue over the next several weeks as we go through the series Well Loved. So we're
Yeah, and you can send questions to Grant either through this format or by email to there.
Yeah.
Or as you mentioned before, if you're not in a life group and you're trying to figure out sort of how to do that, or if you want to do that, then we would encourage you. A good maybe first step towards that is engage here with us on Tuesdays and talk to us, connect with us, because we want this to be beneficial for you and can give you a community to begin to process some of what we're working through these next. It's going to be a 7-week series. So 7 is a number of completion. So hopefully it'll be what I hope it can be.
Amen.
Not
So,
32.
We're holding him
This
to
is-
it.
yes.
32.
I've said it now I've got to hold on to it like that actually matters. But no, yes, that's the goal. So invite you on all of those levels to join us and engage with us as we take this journey together.
Yeah. So thank you all again. We'll see you next Tuesday.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye. Thanks, Becky.
Are you out on your end, Dave?
I think so.
I was going to say it's blinking.
We need some music.